Welcome back to my channel. It has been a while since I've posted anything. I was reading my blog posts in order to share my story. First off, my name is Megan. I have a big interest in art. That's one of my tigers that I drew that I have hanging up on the wall. I'm an aunt. I used to play soccer growing up. I've got a dog named Duke. I've got a great supportive family. So for a long time, I was writing my medical journey out in blog post forum, and then just all the medical that I have in my life kind of took the priority. So I had stopped typing it up, but I kept journaling. So I wanted to jump back in and read the next chapter of my blog. If you're not familiar, I was injured on September 21st, 2005. I jumped up to catch a football in high school gym class, and I landed really, really hard and really, really wrong on my right leg, and I damaged my right ankle severely. Little did I know, I ended up damaging my right ankle, my right knee, and my right hip during that injury. So it's now, like 17 years, which is hard to believe later. I have chapters 1 and 2 already posted onto my channel here. So I'm going to read chapter 3. And to catch you up to speed, I had jumped, I had landed wrong. It took a long time to find a doctor that would take me seriously. And then 5 months after the original injury, I had finally had surgery. And then I started physical therapy. And as I started putting more weight through my leg, I noticed I had a lot of pain in my right knee. And I had a doctor's appointment that was approaching. This was back in 2006 that I was going to be going to go see. So that is where we are at. So officially, chapter 3. I saw my orthopedic a couple weeks later. My ankle was doing great. Yay! However, when I told my doctor I was having sharp pain in my knee, my doctor didn't think it was at all possible to have injured it. He kept trying to tell me that my knee wasn't hurting me, and it was probably due to my ankle. I wasn't buying this reason in any way, shape, or form. He then went on to imply I was saying that my knee was hurting in order to get pain medication from him. Are you kidding me? Pain medication seeking? 1, I had medication left over from my ankle surgery, and 2, I feel awful on pain medication. So why in the world would I be making something up to get medicine that I don't feel good on? It was the farthest thing from the truth. Since I wouldn't drop the issue and I kept being persistent that there was something more going on with my knee, he told me to see his associate who specializes in knees, and he dismissed me from his care. When I went with my mom to see the knee specialist, he initially didn't think there was a problem. I told him I wasn't able to walk without using at least one crutch. I would swell after my exercises, and something in the joints would cause my knee to lock. He decided to order an MRI. Well, would you imagine that? The results showed there was a reason for my symptoms. This meant being back in the operating room in order to have surgery. The problem was my kneecap was being pulled out to the side because the tissue was too tight. This led to my doctor having to perform what is called a lateral release. There was also an enlarged plica, which is swollen tissue, that was getting caught in the joint, which is what was causing my knee to lock. So that was removed. Luckily, this surgery wasn't nearly as invasive as my ankle surgery. As one could imagine, when I ran into my ankle doctor at the office after my knee surgery, I gave him an uncomfortable stare right into his eyes, and he put down his head, looked away from me, and went into an exam room. I think his ego dropped a few points that day because he knows he was wrong. I wasn't drug seeking. Anyways, I wore a knee immobilizer for 2 weeks, but began physical therapy 3 days after surgery. Physical therapy absolutely sucked that soon afterward. I worked really, really hard and was off of the crutches by the end of June. Success. I did not know it then, but the impossible medical journey had begun. As I continued going to physical therapy, I found I could not do all the exercises due to sharp pain in the back of my right hip. It turns out, when I landed from that jump back in September, I damaged my right ankle, my right knee, and my right hip all at once. Since I wasn't allowed to put any weight on my ankle for so long, I never knew I injured my knee or my hip. It wasn't until physical therapy began that I noticed that there was more to this injury than initially thought. It was just a matter of time before going to another orthopedic to figure out what was going on with my hip. Now, the real fun was about to begin. When the pain in my hip would not go away, I knew that it was time to go see my doctor to talk to him about why is my right hip hurting me now. This really can't be happening, is all I thought to myself. I had already gone through ankle surgery to correct the damage, and I had already gone through right knee surgery to correct the damage. I couldn't have possibly damaged my right hip as well. At first, I was in denial that something was wrong. I would go to physical therapy and push through exercises that were very, very painful. It finally got to the point where I had to tell my physical therapist. We tried working on less strenuous exercises, but it didn't change anything. My physical therapist once again told me it's time to go back to the orthopedic. When I went to the doctor, I was more embarrassed than nervous. I knew it sounded crazy to go in and say, my hip is giving me trouble. I was now 17 years old and always attributed hip pain to older people. As I expected, my doctor couldn't believe it. As I sat on the exam table, he asked me what my symptoms were. I told him I had sharp pain when I sit, a constant nagging deep pain, and it felt like my hip would shift out of place when I would walk. He told me he couldn't imagine me injuring my hip. I then reminded him that, well, nobody could have imagined that I injured my knee either, and that resulted in surgery. You could feel the tension in the air. My mom was getting aggravated. She started acting like a drill sergeant. She looked at me and she said, "You, stand up here." She then looked at the doctor and said, "Now you, come over here and examine her when she moves her leg." Needless to say, that got everyone's attention. The doctor started examining my hip and said there's nothing wrong with the front. I said, "You're right. That's because it's the back that's problematic." He went on to say that's just butt pain. I told him, well, then guess what? I have butt pain. It hurts. I then asked if I might have torn the labrum, which is cartilage at the back of my hip. He didn't think so. Not quite sure as to what is going on, the doctor ordered an MRI arthrogram. It was the first time that I had ever had an MRI arthrogram. I didn't know what to expect. A needle is inserted into the front of the hip, and the doctor pushes dye into the joint with a syringe. More than experiencing pain, it was more of an awkward, full, heavy feeling with a lot of pressure. A few days after the MRI was done, the doctor called my mom. He said, "You are not going to believe this because I can't believe this. Megan has a detached posterior acetabular labrum." Easy terms. The cartilage that lines the back of my hip socket was torn away from the bone. The doctor continued to tell my mom that he had already talked to his associates and none of them deal with this injury. What do you mean no one handles this injury? He told my mom that he knew of one doctor in Chicago and that we should go there. Of course, my parents called to schedule the appointment. The doctor was booked out for 2 months. Since I had no choice, I waited until August. On the phone, my parents were told the doctor already read the MRI report and said I would need surgery to correct the problem. A tentative surgical date was set for the end of August. August 2006. First off, to this day, this is one of the most arrogant and disrespectful doctors that I have ever met. I don't think they taught him bedside manners in medical school. When the doctor walked into the room, he said, "Good news, you don't need surgery." The look on my face, as well as my parents', was probably priceless. I looked at the doctor and said, "What do you mean I don't need surgery?" "The labrum is detached." He then proceeded to put my films up and tell me that if I were to have a labral tear, it would be right here on the imaging. He pointed to the top right. When I asked him, "What am I supposed to do?" he got up and said, "Let me examine you." I laid on my back as the doctor picked up my leg and started jerking it around in every direction possible. The pain was insane. He then began to tell me my hip is fine, there is no tear, I am young, move on with life. As I laid there trying to hold back tears, he proceeded to tell me to go into the hall and walk. As one would expect, I was limping. He then told me to walk on my tiptoes, which was very hard for me to do due to the surgery on my ankle and the surgery on my knee that was still healing. The next thing I knew, the doctor literally starts yelling at me in the hall, saying, "Stop limping, there's nothing wrong with you." In my head, I was panicked. Oh my gosh, this cannot be happening again. I am being yelled at for limping. He thinks I'm faking this. Not again. Why do doctors just think I'm making this stuff up? I'm young. I don't want this to be a problem. When the doctor was done yelling at me, he then looked at my parents and said, "You need to yell at her every time she limps. Put her in water aerobics to exercise her hip." At that, the doctor got up and left. My parents and I sat there frozen, unable to speak. The three of us were shocked, dazed, and confused. We gathered up our belongings and left their office. In the car, I told my parents that the doctor is wrong. I am blessed to have parents that believe every word that I have ever told them, and they do not think I'm exaggerating anything that I'm experiencing. During my soccer playing days, I took some really hard falls. I would always keep playing unless I knew there was something seriously wrong. Of course, the last thing I wanted at this point was another injury, but I had learned to know my body really well, and my gut was telling me that there was something wrong. In the car, I was crying. I was beyond mad, and I was hurt, and I had had enough of dealing with doctors. My mom turned around, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Don't worry, we will figure this out." She took out her cell phone. I asked, "Who are you calling?" She said, "The radiologist where you had your MRI done. I want them to reread your films." Genius! My dad thought it was a good idea too. Why didn't we think of that? My mom talked to the radiologist directly and explained everything that had just happened. She was told that he would personally reread my films and call her back. Shortly thereafter, the radiologist called and said, "All three of the radiologists from this facility reread the film and are in agreement that there is a detached posterior acetabular labrum." He mentioned the view number and the location and then proceeded to ask my mom if the super specialist even knows how to read a film because the detachment is right there. I cannot explain the emotions that were flying through the car in that moment. We had just waited 2 months waiting for an appointment to see the super specialist. And all this waiting, I was in really severe pain. We had just spent a lot of money to see him. We had just been yelled at, and we were told he was the only doctor in the area that could fix this problem. And now he's telling us that there isn't one. Now, what are we supposed to do? We were back on our own to figure out what to do and where to go for treatment. So that's the end of chapter 3, and you'll have to stick around for chapter 4. And it's crazy for me to be reading these blogs like this because I haven't read them in a really, really long time. And at this point, this was still 2006. I wasn't even injured a full year. And now, I've been at this chronic medical journey for 17 years. And at this point in time, I had only had 2 surgeries. And since then, up until like right now in the current, I've had 35 surgeries on my body. So it's really weird to read it. and know it's been my life. That is my life. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being dramatic. Like, all of this stuff happened. And what's even crazier is that, like, this is just the very, very beginning. It's the very beginning, and I don't know. We'll be finding out what happens in the next chapter. So thanks for staying around. If you like this, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe. And I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you soon. Bye.